hello there, Bante. Very nice to see you again.
Faye. Good to see you again too. Yeah.
I hope you're doing very, very well. And thank you for coming back for another topic, another discussion. And today's discussion, we're looking at the narcissistic behaviors, which is quite wide, quite deep, I'm sure, and goes into many different channels of psychology. And one of the questions I wanted to start with, based on that, is what is a narcissist? Like, what are the characteristics of a narcissist, if we can define them into kind of like a bunch?
So this is a personality construct. The frequency is about 1 in 1,000, I heard. So about, 1 in 1,000 is said to be the frequency. So if you have a school of 1,000 kids, one, you may get kind of one. Or of all the parents, you might get one, So that's kind of the frequency. And it will tend to stand out. There are, generally speaking, two different constructs that are referred to in narcissism, firstly. And that is covert narcissism or vulnerable narcissism, because they tend to be quiet. They don't shout about it. They don't advertise it. Just they have the same similar characteristics that I'll next say about the other type, but all hidden inside. So then there's the other type, which is an overt or a sort of all out there narcissist. That speaks as if there are black and white categories, but actually there's a lot of oscillating between the two different within a single person. Someone will have both. But let's look at, the traits tend to be what, firstly, you're talking about a personality type where there's an exaggerated sense of self-importance, first and foremost, in the same way that an infant has an exaggerated sense of self-importance. And that's a sort of hint about, the origins of this sort of idea is that basically they don't really develop. What you develop through interacting with siblings and friends and society doesn't happen. So basically an overgrown infant in many ways. They have a sense of, similarly, so they have a sense of entitlement and also require a kind of something called narcissistic supply, which is a supply of constant and excessive admiration. They need a lot of applause and a lot of supporting the ideas that they are wonderful, fantastic, unique, and so on, and much better than everyone else. They expect that. The need for that is like oxygen for a narcissistic type of person who hasn't managed to work on this problem. So as I say, when we make it fixed, like they are this, we make it sound like it cannot be changed. Now, it's not likely to be changed, but it can be. But it's just not likely for several reasons, partly because they don't believe there's any problem. They just have they just visit a lot of problems on other people. And they also don't recognize that, and they also don't really care. So, but first of all, they don't recognize it. There's just, that's those other people just showing how inferior and defective they are. So there's this, this expectation to be recognized as superior, even without anything to show for it. So they might just believe, I'm just a fantastic musician. But when it comes to show something on the piano or the guitar or singing, it's just nothing there. They haven't actually developed any skills. But that's just a sort of trivial detail. The fact that they haven't got any musical skills, but they just are brilliant. As far as they're as good as Mozart, if not a bit better. And they could have made Beethoven a few tips, but show me something. So I didn't know, you just won't understand the way it works. I think so, something like that. And then so they exaggerate the actual achievements. If they had any, they exaggerate them, and they tend to lie and bend the memories towards, if their little village got to Wembley Stadium, to them they won, but actually they might have lost. But in reality, so for example, there's that kind of thing. So they tend to also exaggerate their talents, that they are just a bit better than a lot of people, that the world recognize people, and they tend to just imagine and exaggerate that and lie, like I say, about the achievements that they actually got in life. And then they're preoccupied with this. As I say, it's to do with the idea of narcissistic supply, that they need to keep the story going and going and going and going. Their fantasies about success, actually how powerful they are, their brilliance, their beauty, or they're also their perfect mates. They tend to have sort of trophy mates. This is all part of it. Yeah, people tend to be puppets, to be manipulated by them in order to get the feed that they need from wherever it comes. So it'll, you know, whatever will give them attention, admiration, they will use anyone mercilessly and then throw them away, who will just back up that idea, all of those ideas, and this kind of belief that they're superior, and that they can also only associate with equally superior people, you know, and other people are just worth, you know, just disregarded because they're not special. They're not in the special league. They tend to monopolize conversations, belittle other people. They tend to hijack conversations. They expect favors. They expect just compliance as well with that. The things that they're just entitled to just because they're them. They take advantage of others. They exploit, manipulate, and just destroy and demean others. So there's a sort of there are sort of patterns that they use to do this. They tend to excite people by love bombing them, to sort of make them feel they're wonderful, and then rapidly they will do the opposite. They will devalue them, demean them, destroy them, disregard them, and then strangely they'll whiz it up again and then keep telling them how fantastic they are. And this cycle tends to confuse people. Confusion is one of the methods that a narcissist will use in order to keep someone disempowered. One of the things that they wish to do is to have powerless people around them who are easily manipulated. So confusion is one of the ways that they will do that, by constantly moving goalposts, constantly moving boundaries, constantly giving them confusing information and tasks, and something called gaslighting, which is dropping lots and lots of little hints that the other person is nervous, insecure, mentally defective, and make them doubt their own reality, because then they can manipulate them more. So then they can, once they're manipulable, they can also take advantage of them to get what they want, and to sort of start creating the story, you know, which suits their projection. So there's a lot of that, a lot of projection, a lot of self-identification, and high expectations. A lot of lack of insight. Another thing that's very characteristic is lack of empathy. So there's only one need in their world, which is theirs. There's only one thing that's interesting. Other people's needs are just a kind of huge blind spot in them. So that lack of empathy, and also I think it's neurobiological. It's like their mirror neurons aren't properly activated. So when somebody else is showing needs, you know, they're not really picking them up. And they're not really able to respond in the compassion and empathy and sympathy range. So generally it's one-way traffic. It's just all about them. And they're very bored. They're bored very quickly, because they're just not interested in those other stories. When people start giving in their ideas and their needs and their feelings and reporting their experience, they just quickly get tuned out, because it's just not interesting to them, because there's only one thing that's interesting to them. It's them. The conversation tends to be only about one thing, and it's them. So if you want to sit down and have a beer with a narcissist, just be prepared to listen to one subject, and it's them and their life, and them and their life, and them and their life, and them and their history and their life, and them and their life, and me and what I'm doing. But what I used to do, it's just all going to be about one subject. A couple of other traits are the envy. There's actually a lot of envy there, but they expect other people to be envy and jealous of them. They just think that's a given because they are so high and superior, that they assume this sort of jealousy around others. And
like a possessiveness. Are they quite possessive when they have somebody, like you were saying, like a sort of using people as puppets, and it's like, you know, this is mine, this is my person, this is my
it's not quite the same as a regular person being possessive. For a full-blown narcissist, the other is not another, they are them. There's one of the problems is like, you know, if I put my arm out, you know that you might say, well, this is me. Well, that actually is what they're seeing of another person.
Yes.
They are them.
Yeah.
So, and when the other person starts to exhibit signs of personal identity and separation, so that's a bit confusing for them. Because they operate with a sort of circle around them of them. And everybody who doesn't sort of work like that, to show that that other person is actually them, it's just an extension of them. They start reacting in various ways to try to bend it back the way that they see it. Now
that's fascinating. Yeah. What kind of tactics have you researched about that? What kind of tactics would they use to bend?
Well, it's the emotional immaturity involved in that is not dissimilar to the what goes on in the dynamics with the relationship between alcoholics parents who are very emotionally immature and incapable of meeting their children's needs or their partner's needs, and with narcissistic parents. So the dynamics often then, you know, children tend to either conform to it all and just agree and go along with the whole story. Yes, daddy's brilliant, daddy's fantastic, daddy's the best, rather than turning around to them and going, hey, stop doing that, you know, challenging them, because that doesn't go down very well. You're then likely to get sacked.
Yeah. From
which which you can't do in a family. So you know, you can do that if you're in a government that's being run by someone who's very narcissistic. So you tend to see a lot of that going on, or a CEO. There's a lot of sacking, a lot of dismissing, because that's basically what they've always been doing, is dismissing people from their company who aren't going along with the idea, the main idea, which is, you know, what I said, like they're all fantastic and that. So the people who then do the challenging tend to become scapegoated. That is just sort of slung out because they're not wanted anymore, or they're not welcome. The way that they're slung out, if it's too early for them to be physically sort of slung out, as in the parent-child phenomena, they tend to be gaslighted, or the general story goes on, they're crazy. They're the one that's a bit weird. They're the one who's got defective mind.
Yeah, it's like emotional control, manipulation. It's like, actually, you're the problem. So it's like making the other person feel bad about themselves.
Not really. Well, yeah, that bit of it, but the message who goes out to the group is that one is a bit crazy, or, you know. So that sort of implication that they're mentally ill or deranged, or all becomes because they're not complying. So you tend to get, you know, the offspring who just go along with everything and imitate the values and the pattern, and then they're likely also to become narcissistic too.
Right. Yeah.
And go on and repeat it all. But the ones who turn around and go, whoa, you know, treat people equally, stop being so dismissive, stop being so, you know, which the narcissist doesn't want to hear. They just tune that out as soon as they start hearing all this stuff back, like, hey, you should go and see someone. There's something a bit wrong with you. That's not normal behavior. The one who's going to become the black sheep of the family, who's going to become ostracized, or who's going to be portrayed as schizophrenic, mad, weird, oddball, you know, just a failure.
Yes.
You know? So that's one of the ways that they start to respond.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good in-depth answer.
That's right. Well, and the reverse of that is the one who tends to play along becomes the golden child. So this, you know, this is a kind of recognized phenomenon with narcissistic families, is you get the golden child who is given all the brownie points for being super brilliantly, what they're being super brilliant is not calling out the narcissist and advertising the basic story that they're the best thing that ever happened. They're the most superior generation. They're the most intelligent, the most talented, high caliber sort of being. So those are some of the. So this thing between golden child, the scapegoat, the black sheep, that's pretty sort of recognizable.
Sure, absolutely, that's brilliant. So what kind of coping mechanisms could be presented to the child, depending on their age, of course, to help them break the pattern, maybe to recognize, you know, children, for example, and I've seen it firsthand because we kind of semi in it at the moment, but seeing like a child grow up where the child recognizes instinctively that the behavior of the parent isn't right, but isn't in an age or in an independent or adult enough situation to be able to make that change or to be able to rationalize it even. But there's already that kind of feeling connected with, this doesn't feel right, I don't like this behavior, but I can't do anything, and the person who is delivering the behavior is my parents, so I should be listening to them, because isn't that what we're meant to do with parents? Well, we're not meant, you know, we don't have to, but that's, as a child, that's what we think. What kind of coping mechanisms could we offer children that are in that situation?
Children shouldn't be in that situation.
No. But
so
sometimes
this is what there's a phenomena called no contact. No contact means that it means zero. It means removing a child from it and keeping them removed, and that is like 100%. Maybe like Christmas phone call, birthday phone call. But narcissists don't know the damage they do. And the stronger the trait is, then the worse it is. But there's a thing called narcissistic exposure, which is damaging just on impact. The messages that are received are basically extremely damaging, and will lead to personality problems and depression and all kind of things. So, I mean, one of the things is previous lack of awareness. This generation, this period of time, this last sort of 15 years has been really sort of groundbreaking in making more information available. But that's only part of it. So that's the education part, the explanation part. But even if you've had narcissistic exposure, you'll be suffering from depression, wounds, hurting, and also complex PTSD. So like PTSD is like someone goes to Iraq, they're in the war, a big bang goes off next to them, they go home. When they hear a big bang, you know, the system goes into shock again. I think complex PTSD is tiny shocks daily, repeatedly, over a long period of time that creates a great sense of nervousness and insecurity and doubting and confusion in the person about basic values and basic who they are and their value, their worth, and how the way that the world works. Because the influence of primary care is so great. But if you're getting 50% of that coming from a narcissist, you're getting 50% confusing information. So any parent who gets aware that is the problem. Because it's one of the concealed problems. It's like the problem that isn't a problem. It's like, you know, when the president is saying, no, there's no problem. No problem. It's only sort of like a few who are doing the whistle blowing or reporting things, what's really going on. And a lot of other people who lack insight and lack awareness will smother over and cover over and apologize for and enable and all of that. So it takes, I think when anyone gets either experience of it personally, they wouldn't hesitate. Because for most people, something like no contact is too dramatic, or they believe that it will cause harm because they don't really aware of the kind of harm, mainly because it's on the emotional plane. You know, if someone's physically abusive or sexually abusive, So physically abusive, you're going to see cuts and wounds and bruises and things like that. So there's suddenly the police will jump in and grab the kid right out of there.
Yeah.
But when you've got nothing to show for it, and a narcissist can be very healthy looking. They can be physically well, good complexion.
Yeah.
Well dressed. They get charming. You do a lot of things. So it's not necessarily that your regular public is even going to acknowledge there's a problem at all.
Sure.
So it's only when that there is real clarity and all of the red flags and the check boxes start lining up, and you realize, this is the problem. It's not he's paranoid. It's not that he's depressive. It's not something else. It's narcissism. And when it's that, and it's not any of the other spectrum of problems, it's that one. The correct thing is to go no contact, because it's the only one that works. Because they're so adept at manipulation. They're so adept at making sure that people don't leave their little fishbowl, their little orbit, and wounding and crippling people emotionally to make sure that they don't leave.
Sure, like an emotional control kind of thing.
It's one of the methods for emotional control. Well, it's for behavioral control, and then the emotional part follows on. I mean, if you're around a narcissist, you're going to get vampired. You're going to get your energy sucked out. You're going to be walking around on eggshells. You're going to be nervous. You're not going to be sure if your nerves are working correctly. You're not sure what to say. Especially if you've got it in your family pattern.
My God, all the boxes on my bit of paper are being ticked here.
Yeah, and the other thing, as you implied, is difficult if you're to the extent that you're unaware of it, which the great majority of people are, because they don't really feel they got a need for it, or they think it's just funny, or everyone's like that. That people make excuses and kind of enable it. Is they don't think there's anything really wrong with it because they haven't had when someone is strongly narcissistic. And you've got to remember, it's in the spectrum that because you're having this absolute lack of empathy for other people, they're colorblind to other people's needs, you're in the similar spectrum to psychopathy. So a psychopath will always be narcissistic. A narcissist won't always be psychopathic. Because they don't have necessarily the cruel component. They don't necessarily have the sadistic component that's in psychopathy. People equate confidence with wisdom, or entitlement with power, and power with accomplishment. If they see someone in a fancy car, they go, oh well, they must be cool, they must be good, they must be on it. They know something I don't know, because hey, look, they've already got the trophy wife and the fast car. So there's not really yet. I think there is an increasing better understanding, and also more independently accessible support means. So I'm talking about, if you go on Facebook and you put in the little search at the top, narcissism, so you're going to see 10 plus groups, children, because alcoholism wasn't really recognized. Nowadays we've got AA, 10-step program. Now you're starting to get children of narcissistic parents abuse support groups. And now you're starting to get as well really actually available therapy, affordable, online. So it's like the old-fashioned libraries. Even before public libraries, it was just who had the books. Well, who had the books, so it's very difficult to get to them. And then public libraries a bit better, and then suddenly, hey, whoa, online. Well, it's happening with online therapy. So you can go to Google and sort of search online therapy, and you're going to find several that are more affordable. I mean, I'm living in the Philippines, where there's 40% of people are below the poverty line. They're living on, less than $5 a day. So I think this is still under American standards, which is they don't know what they don't know what it means, kind of, because it's sort of within the American sphere. But I'm seeing ones that are getting more and more affordable, you know, and that's a good step. It means that before, someone who's young and had to spend their time in their room, and they're then dealing with all of the depression and the deprivation, and they're dealing with this contest, this daily contest of hyper competitiveness with their primary carer, who's belittling them, mocking them, putting them down, making them look a failure, you know, and trying to disregard any of their needs, you know, their needs, and so on. They're in their room. They have access. They're getting more access, Childline, and those kind of things are getting more tuned to the different needs across the full spectrum. It's not. It's getting there. I say it's in my opinion, it's like 25, 30 years behind the curve. Sure. It's a long way behind, you know, what was required back then. But these cultures, you know, British and American, Australian, New Zealand, Canadian, those cultures, English-speaking language for this kind of topics are slow moving. They've had histories of, you know, professions and so on, but it's getting better. So yeah, so a child, a teen can get access to YouTubes. They can get access to online therapy groups. You know, you got Talkspace, things like these that have 7,000 therapists available, and that's not, you know, some of those, or e-therapy, where you can at least get 3 free days, and then, you know, get lined up with probably a pretty relevant kind of therapist. I think it's something that needs to be tried out. Sure. But that is, you know, apart from the most people who are very narcissistic will try to be hyper controlling and hyper competitive, and hyper unreasonable as well. Because their aim is control. Everything is done for the sake of maintaining control. Everything they say, do, and act. It doesn't matter about a problem or problem solving. The problem for them is how to maintain their narcissistic supply. And part of that is seeing that they are in control of others. And one way to do that is to deprive them of various things. So, you know, but given you've got stuff like online schooling and so on. So school counselors is a way to go. But, you know, like, I think once the children start being able to recognize this phenomena, and that's very difficult for them. It's very difficult for a child to accept their narcissistic parent is a narcissistic parent, because they've never heard anything about this. They've constantly been told they're a hero. The parent is a hero. Yeah. And they are a child of a hero. So they're also a hero. And also, you know, you don't need to sort of listen and follow all those rules and everyone else is doing. They've been told they're also entitled and above all the rules and the laws, and you know, they just don't have to go along with it all. So they may be homeschooled, deschooled, or just told that it doesn't really matter because, hey, you know, the way reality works, that's other people's nonsense because they're inferior. They all have to pass all those tests, and, you know, but we just us. So, you know, those kind of things are weighing in on the child's sanity, on their sense of identity, and they got to eat with someone 3 meals a day, you know, and so that's often you know, that's a classic time, because then the narcissist has, you know, they have them control. You know, there's no choice about that. And if a child decides, oh, I'm not going to eat, I'm not hungry, because often they will, once they get into it and they start to realize something is deeply wrong, my survival and existence is under threat. Yes, it is. You know, they are likely to just get chewed up and spat out. Yeah. For the sake of the promotion of the narcissist, they will often be in an adrenaline cycle. So they won't be able to sleep, and they won't be able to eat, and they won't be able to relax, and they'll be very dysregulated. So they're running on fumes. They're often and depressed, like I say, and confused. So there's a lot of things going on there. All of these, you know, are just some of the reasons why. What is the first thing is to identify the problem as a secondary carer, and the other is get the children out of there. There are many reasons that people don't. Often narcissists are often attractive to dependent personality people.
Yeah.
Dependent personality people are the kind of people who have a fuzzy sense of self and often put their decision-making processes out to other people to decide for them. What should I be? Who should I be? You know, what should I do? What should I eat? What should I look like? That kind of thing. There's this kind of thing called the dance of the narcissist and the dependent that goes on. And the worst thing about it is that the dependents recognize, you know, that they're like magnetized, but they will often recognize the narcissist, but have this tragic attraction of trying to believe that they can fix them. And it works too well that they never twig on that it will never happen. Mainly, but I mean, but narcissists very rarely do change, and they often get worse. They often actually get worse as they get older. The only time it often is when people at work or other family members somehow manage to get the message round to them. Yeah. And it does somehow get home that you're causing a lot of damage and we won't tolerate it in some kind of way. But as I said, I've shown you why, you know, explain like scapegoating and all the things. That people who are confrontational, it's like confronting an alcoholic, is you're just more likely to end up with a broken nose or sort of being pushed away than that turning into them going to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the other person who's got the problem. Because of that, the projection thing is you are disgusting, you are a failure, not me, you. It's a lot about that. There's a lot of that within narcissistic dynamics, is blaming others and shaming others, and a lot of that is to keep away from the, but because overt narcissists just simply believe there's nothing wrong with them. You know, it's the kind of Donald Trump sort of caricature is that this is no question. So what's to discuss? Right, let's move on. So it's very difficult to get it through to them. But then, you know, so once they would be gotten into therapy, you know, many therapists would say, well, we didn't make much progress because they didn't show up, because they had something better to do, and explained that it was seeing someone important, not them, you know, that kind of thing. So there's you know, they will use the similar wriggling out and manipulating and so on. So back to the, you're saying about the what child coping strategies. Children are in the backseat of the car. You know, they don't have another car to get in. It's really down to the circle of people around them. Many times, you know, children who are in a narcissistic, you know, whatever, later on, the non-direct family members will often then, you know, be saying, I thought, you know, I was saying to my husband that he's abusing those child. You shouldn't be talking like that. He's mocking them. You shouldn't talk to a young child like that. Later, so it's too late by then. So that's the great need for action, and not this sort of deluded, you know, like the deluded strategies of the dependent is, for example, I will show him who's really more powerful, because I've seen that sort of emptiness inside him, I've seen the insecurity. I will dominate him, I will control him, he won't control me. And so the endless squabbling, battling thing just goes on, and then before you know it, you know, 12 years has turned into 24, has turned into 36, and it still hasn't really changed. So by the time they found out that what they should have done was actually get real information from really professionally qualified, which they never did, because why? Because, you know, because the narcissist was controlling the purse strings, and they're hyper stingy, and they will never, you know, let money out for that reason. So the whole loop goes on, and the kids are now gone forward with depression and confusion and personality problems and all the rest of it. And the narcissist is still gloating and in the big house with luxury, everything. So they've been used. you know, and that is what primarily what children are for narcissists, is a means to an end, which is the look of normality, the look of success, the look of, you know, what looks good at the golf club and all that. It's not meeting the needs of the children at all. If the children's, you know, has a tendency towards, you know, horse riding or chess or swimming, you know, that's not going to happen. You know, they're probably just going to get the duplicate of what the narcissist had in terms of everything, because hey, it made me, so it must work for you. Something, you know, and you can't get better than that. So those are sort of typical narcissistic patterns. And as I say, what coping mechanisms children have got, online therapy, those kind of, well, child lines is about more, you know, abuse. As I say, as it's specific for narcissism, or specifically with therapists who are trained, because many therapists go, oh yeah, I've heard about it, I know about that kind of stuff. They don't, and they'll just sort of do their regular thing, and often then you'll only catch up later on that they're not bringing narcissism into it at all, because it's a sort of poo-poo subject, or it's just pop culture, or you know, Spice Girls, I know what they're talking about roughly, let's move on, you know, sort of, let's get you onto proper therapy or something like that. It needs to be really people who know about this, because I say, like, you know, it's kind of 1 in 1,000, so it's still a pretty big problem. It's kind of 1% of the population ish. It's so you need I think regular therapists who've met their narcissist coming in through the door never want to touch it again. It's like a few other problems, like borderline, you know, who tend to suicide or slash their wrists. Many therapists don't want anything to do with that. They don't really want to experience a high rate of patients or coming in who are likely to suicide, so they won't go near that problem. You know, they'll just refer them on. And so narcissists, so they don't necessarily really get to go into it because there's just not enough hours in the day. It's a big subject. It's a science. This is the main thing. And my experience also is one of the things is that people believe, regular people who are experiencing in adult life CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, like when they realize they're in a workplace and they're experiencing bullying, and then it's not just bullying, you know, they've got that same thing like my mum had, they've got that same thing like my father had. Oh no, this is just like home. Look, and they will go into many multiple reactions, and, you know, panic and physiological reactions, which are just like the reactions they had in their bedroom alone as a kid, when they feel isolated, they feel panic, they feel traumatized, and they are traumatized at that stage, and they haven't ever really dealt with it. At that point, often, you know, like they're going to be calling out to friends, and their friends are going, get over it, you know, it's not really as bad as you're making out. Yeah, I've got someone like that at work. They won't really realize the true nature of the problem. Because then when people try to involve narcissism back at the home that's being re-traumatized, then the words and the thoughts and the ideas of those regular people, untrained people, are hopeless. And they don't know the science of it. They don't, all the things kind of, you know, the kind of moving parts that I've been talking about tonight, they just don't have awareness of it, because it takes a huge amount of time to absorb it and listen to all the videos and all the experts and get your head around the phenomena. It's a specialist subject.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I guess therefore a narcissistic person has no kind of capacity of self-awareness, in the sense of, you know, asking themselves the question, you know, am I doing this right? Is that affecting that person?
That's what they don't do.
Yeah,
that's part of empathy. Those two questions don't trigger off.
No,
you know, instead of the question that you just said, like am I doing this properly, what they are seeing is that person is making me look stupid.
Yeah,
so they are therefore stupid. So the question never comes back, is it anything to do with me? It's it's a remote control. You know, it's like a remote control of a telly. Their way of working at people. It's kind of one-way traffic.
Yeah.
And if there's any signs that other person is turning around to them saying, "Hey, you," then that's sort of a nonsense to them.
Yeah.
That's just proof that that person is inferior and probably couldn't possibly understand what's happening.
Sure.
So those empathy things, oh, that person is suffering. Is it something to do with my behavior? That's what never got set up in the first place, or has been numbed right out through their own upbringing, because they may have been primed in their own childhood to just be winners and to do that at all costs, including destroying people around them for that.
Sure.
So
and
yeah,
that's important. For the child to have been growing up for a substantial amount of their early years, and therefore to have learned from the parent that is the narcissist, they will have learned some of those personality traits. And like you're saying, to completely remove, which I totally get that. I really get that. And then I guess it's like the coping mechanism or the onward help for that child to then maybe to help them change those behavioral patterns for something else, which is much more harmonious: compassion, love, self-respect, respect for others, kindness, gentleness, listening. That's really important. I think that's quite a difficult thing to do as well, because neurologically they will already have grown up. Maybe both parents weren't narcissistic, but if one was, they'll have learned kind of some behavioral patterns from one parent, and then some narcissistic behavioral patterns from the narcissistic parent. So there'll be some kind of behavioral patterns in there that somehow will need to be reprogrammed. Is that possible? I mean, can you reprogram that stuff even from like the early years of an 8-year-old, let's say?
I wouldn't like to say. I think that's a bit specialist. Like if you're talking about, say for example, cognitive behavioral therapy is where you work on the thoughts. You work more on the thinking level, and that could be. You check, because there is much more. There's some very, very good videos by a specialist called Dr. Todd Granda. And what he does, for example, is give examples of the typical thoughts of both covert and overt narcissists.
Yeah.
Before they act, because like with covert narcissists, they don't reveal their thoughts. They've learned very early on, or they are aware something is different about me to everyone else, but they don't want to shout about it.
Yeah.
They are aware that something is weird and something is different, and it's weird about my feelings, and it's weird about me, and that's significant. So if a person like that can get into therapy and into an area where they feel safe to pull out some of these ideas, then they would be able to work on them. Yeah, I think that's so that's CBT. That's cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Working on these with children, art therapy, play therapy. I think those are all sort of possibilities by people who are trained and who understand narcissism. Yeah, I think those are possibilities. But this is a little bit out of it. So that's a specialist kind of name. I wouldn't like to make too many sweeping sort of.
Yeah, I understand. That's great guidance. Absolutely. I got so many questions, but I don't know. I don't know how you are on time. I guess. I'm
good. No, I'm good. I'm fine. Really. Yeah, this is a good topic. Good topic as well. And I think it's fruitful to sort of mull it over as well. It takes a little while to get. So there's a lot of shades, a lot of subtlety. I haven't really pondered too deeply. Sometimes, if you're a teacher and you're working with, you've got students who are presenting with narcissistic behavior. So it can be quite challenging, and but they can be very unpopular with teachers because they tend to sort of not comply.
Yes.
And the reasons being given are just kind of, because, well, I'm picky. Or they're starting already to show this sort of aloofness and specialness without any. There are special students, or there are very, intelligent or creative and accomplished students. But as a teacher, you see them working hard to do that.
Yeah. So
it's not easy to like narcissists. So that can also be a problem with, with children, is they can be not very likable. So, that can be hard work for the healing part of it as well. How much you can do that with working on the cognitive level to get the children to be aware that, contempt.
Yeah.
If they're daddy speaks to mummy like that, sort of like, or imitate. Like distance is a very good thing.
Yeah.
Because narcissists use triangulation a lot, playing people off each other. So if you're not getting enough distance, that can get in there, where the narcissist is playing people off against each other as part of their manipulation.
Right.
Then you can get other complications where one of or either of the parents can recognize the other partner in their child, and that can be difficult because they might look like them, they might have physical similarities. So when you see them behaving, go, oh no, you remind me of him or her. So then you get extra, repercussions going on. Immersion in regular people is actually very healthy and has its healing effect.
Yes.
The playground effect.
Yeah.
One of the methods that narcissists use is isolation. Then they can monopolize and control the reality of their victims. But so getting the child to understand that, that gaslighting, I mean, all of those things, contempt, invalidation, dismissiveness, minimization. That's not important. I know she does gardening, but those veggies, it's nothing, or that the more that you can get them to recognize these things, that's the basis of insight, is being able to name a problem as a problem instead of what the narcissists tend to do. Also to infuse in them the idea of equality rather than entitlement, of valuing people instead of devaluing them. And getting them to really respect healthy mental behavior. And I mean, the more you can just get them to recognize, so enabling is a thing that people tend to do, which is to sort of just going quiet and not really naming a behavior. So when someone is constantly critical, it's just to let it go, just to let it go, just to let it go. Storm will pass, never mind. So that's it. That's enabling the person to go on. So if the child sees that kind of enabling behavior, they will tend to copy or go quiet, or just because there's not going to be any change going on. So, like distinctly naming the problems. If there's a gas leak on your home, just going, never mind, I see a problem, so it's not a problem. Naming a problem as, a toxic behavior as a toxic behavior. I mean, if the child is replaying it, you can try to do that, but very clearly state the lines, not emotionally erupting and being afraid and so on, but is being patient and clarifying what is normal and what are. I think this sort of current vogue of red flags, recognizing red flag behavior, really helps, because they're usually succinct, and people need succinct. 9 red flags if someone's doing this, so that if someone's setting fire to things or hurting little animals, That's a red flag for psychopathy. You know,
Yeah.
if someone stares at you, you know, that's a red flag for psychopathy. So you should know that. You know, that's worth knowing. And similarly for narcissism, there are distinct traits, and there's more and more brief videos, 5-minute, 7-minute videos that are describing them, so that when you hear them in real life, you're more likely to go, I recognize what that is. That's what that guy was talking about.
Yeah.
That lady was talking about on the video. So I think the more that you can do that with children, you know, doing it for children, children tend to learn through parables, fables, moral stories, animal stories. And we've got a fair amount out there in the culture, in your sort of Jungle Book and, you know, sort of Jungle Book, you know, Shere Khan, the tiger is obviously, you know, you get unwholesome, the jealous, the nasty, you know, the cruel, the selfish, the self-centered. People tend to know those values generally. If a child's in that situation, mainly I think it's third parties that need to be prompt, and they need to be realistic, and they need to be informed to protect a child, and not to be hysterical as well. I think that's you know, overreacting, and there are bad strategies with narcissists. It's good to know what they are. It's the same as you know, if you're learning first aid or firefighting, you should know if you see someone, you know, who's had a motorbike accident, you know, don't pick them up and carry them off somewhere, you know, you might break their neck or something. Well, similarly, I think with protecting children, there are many things that are, you know, for people who are not well informed, could muck things up and make them worse. So more information and more advice, you know. So I think, again, if you're anywhere near the sphere of something like this kind of phenomena, you should be getting qualified. And I'm not qualified, by the way. You know, I'm not. I'm just vested interest in learning about it personally. But some things, you know, for example, you know, one of my first reactions was to go wading in with a book on family therapy into this nest of, you know, of my relatives and families, and that was a really bad idea. And it only took me years later on to learn about no contact, wherein if once you employ it, everything works out for everyone involved, them too. So, you know, you don't get any, you know, progress by trying to learn to hug and give, you know, give narcissists foot massages every day, as if that's going to kind of work for something. There are bad strategies, and there's bad strategies for, I would assume, for protecting children. That's not something I've had a huge experience of, to be honest. But I would have thought some of those things that I've talked about would, I think the you know, the guidance helplines, the therapy chat ones, but like I say, trained people, they've got MAs, you know, they've got scientific, forensic, analytical knowledge, and they're trained in it. Not just anyone.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a very difficult job for anyone.
On the whole behavior, specific behavior.
What I do know, so no, just as an addendum to that, is the ones that I did listen to, they also encompass the idea that a delicate and informed person can go in and can help a narcissist. I think there's a danger that they become kind of the black sheep, you know, they become the all evil, you know, all evil, satanic, you know,
avoid them, you know, across the road.
Demonized thing, attack. It's not enough to just recognize someone who's suffering. So they're suffering too. They must know, and it, you know, it may be on a very unconscious level. But there is that, is to say that the most skilled one, and I think the most skilled one I've seen is Dr. Todd Grande. He's got a very good video, you know, YouTube's loads of them. Is he will talk about how narcissists can be dealt with, and there are books on, you know, how to talk to your narcissist. There are things you shouldn't say to them. There are ways that are helpful, and behaviors that tend to go along, so you don't make them explode with rage, that you don't aggravate them or have, you know, expectations of them that are going to make you confused and frustrated. So there are ways to to navigate your way, you know, once you realize you're in the situation with 1, 2, 3, multiple, two narcissistic parents, or a narcissistic sibling, or whatever it is, or a child that's narcissistic, there are ways to handle that situation. There are ways not to, you know, that
yeah.
some
Just
are wiser than others. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's great. Would mindfulness help? Would the practice of mindfulness help the person that is trying to cope with a person that's in their life who is narcissistic? Because would that empower them to be more present and more in contact with their immediate feelings, that intuitive self of what feels right, what doesn't feel right, what's hurting, what's hurtful, and what's acceptable, or acceptable and not acceptable, and hurtful and safe? Would mindfulness be something that would be like a gentle practice that even children could find some kind of empowerment and some sort of self-control that would allow them to feel more strong in themselves to then move into the next part of, you know, maybe the therapeutic journey, or deal with the moment if they can't get out of the situation immediately?
I don't think you can categorically say it, because mindfulness tends to be done in isolation, whereas 2 of the therapies that are recommended, one is psychodynamic, because you're then able to talk with someone about your experience and get help with the insight part, the interpretation part. Mindfulness is non-interpretive. So one of the problems of people coming out of the other end of that situation, so if you went on a month-long or 2-month-long retreat, you know, whatever, you know, and it was all on mindfulness, is you've got brain fog. You've got a kind of confusion. You've got a scattered sense of direction. You are very disoriented. So just trying to expect mindfulness to just click in on top of all that lot is not necessarily going to happen. There's no guarantee that in mindfulness centers you're not going to find narcissists, because narcissists like it when they have a feeding pool of people. So I visited, you know, hundreds and hundreds of meditation centers. I've seen narcissistic dynamics going on in some. Like I say, this is 1 person in 1,000, but this can actually be quite an arena that would, in some ways, suit loads of people bowing at you. You know, you don't have to work through employment challenges. You know, you've got quite an easy setup there in some ways. So you know, you might get re-traumatized if you just expect that if I just said, mindfulness, Kate, go for it, and you go off on some retreat and then suddenly find yourself under the power of this sort of narcissistic meditation teacher. Happens. You know, you got like, or Bikram, you know, this hot yoga guy, he's totally narcissistic, or Osho, or many people that have shown up eventually to either have narcissistic assistants, in the case of Osho, I think wasn't it, and or like the Wild West documentary seemed to show that. So so mindfulness, maybe, depending. It depends on, you know, how well vetted the person is that you're dealing with, or people. It's no guarantee just because it's called mindfulness with a capital M. It's all right. The other thing is, which would apply to also to the other things I was going to say. One is as a psychodynamic. So, you know, you could check the therapist. Because if you're wounded, you're going to tend to be magnetized to the wrong kind of people. You tend to be magnetized to a narcissist, is what you recognize. And you tend to have, you know, other phenomena like being a people pleaser, especially to them. You want to serve a narcissist because it's what you understand. And you tend to have other things that feed that, like perfectionism. And depression anyway. So things are going on in there. But psychodynamic, which is psychotherapy talking about your family patterns and backgrounds, That's concentrating on the past. That's a problem-focused type of therapy. And if it's a child, I don't know, probably play therapy in combination with that would probably start to get the therapist to understand to the extent of what's going on with them. You know, that if they start, you know, saying things that tend to, they can gauge the extent of the narcissistic traits that are presenting already. Yes. So yeah, that kind of therapy may help if they've had a very narcissistic mother who's been bombarding them with manipulation and so on. You know, you may get them to start to take on board that some changes, you know, that maybe that she's not the perfect person. Maybe she's not at all, you know, and how to deal with that shocking traumatic thought and everything that goes with it, that they've been used and they've been lied to or so on, or that they've been unfairly treated, you know, which is, I think that kind of getting through that denial is a big part of anyone's healing. How you get there, like I say, play therapy. I think also, psychotherapy is tending to be said to be a good one for people with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. One that on the groups that I've seen, the ones that are specific to children of narcissistic parents, is something called EMDR. But it's something to do with like moving the eyeball in certain directions and also recalling the memories. It's where the specific most traumatic memories of being shocked, you know, and being totally confused or hurt by wounding words, you know, so on. I can't tell you much about it because I don't know that much about it, but I do hear that being flagged up quite a lot on the comments threads when people are saying, you know, what kind of therapy? How do I make a choice? People are chipping in saying, oh yeah, you know, I had that. One thing I did notice that somebody said, and I can't vouch for any of these. It's just, I'm just telling you what I found, which was that when you start to get this idea on that daddy is, you know, that type that everyone's talking about. So you're actually, you know, you've got a huge hand grenade in your stomachs of this knowledge. Yeah. Because it's a kind of fact, it's a rubber stamp, you know, daddy's that. I think that's a bit harsh, and it's not always also accurate or true. Sure. For example, there's another condition called OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And these people tend to be workaholics, stingy, perfectionistic, and in some ways they have some shared characteristics with narcissistic personality disorder people. So, but when you read the OCPD, you tend to be a little bit more sympathetic somewhere. You know, so until someone is actually diagnosed and it's accurately being monitored and so on by a professional, I think it's a bit risky to sort of rubber stamp one and say they are one of those, because then you get this mentality of us and them, and you make a kind of object of them and a stereotype of them, and that kind of black and white thinking is not ever going to really help anyone in the process. So when you get that kind of knowledge and you dwell on it, you tend also to get caught in a spiral of thinking about the past and believing that sort of focusing on the past and the family dynamics and the family people is what's going to work, is what's going to help. And that's not necessarily true, particularly if you're doing it on your own. You haven't got a qualified therapist you're working with. I'm only saying that because psychodynamic and you know, Freudian, Ana-Freudian or original Freudian psychotherapy is a lot about childhood. So the assumption is that that's what therapy is going to do. It's like who I was, which also mindfulness doesn't do, by the way. Is all, you know, going in and tell me about your brother and your sister and when your father and you and then and that. It's all going into all that old stuff. That's a distinct contrast to another form of therapy called solution focused. And solution focused, you don't do any of that. There's the bare minimum of thinking or talking or focusing on the past. You're focusing on what's working right now. It's nothing to do with that stuff. It's not chewing over and mulling over and digging up and getting into heavy emotions like guilt and all that. And well, if I suppose, sexual stuff or, but digging and probing and all that. But you're focusing on, what's working and what progress is going on so far. So it's much more constructive. It's much briefer as well, because once you start getting into psychotherapy, it's kind of a never-ending story. And you often find that people, who've been in that are kind of a bit shaky. They never seem to be sort of closure, because there's a never-ending amount of it, right? Memories and all that. So you're really talking about a very simple, brief, and only concentrating on these sort of solutions and, what's working. You're not talking about the problem. You're not talking about the past. You're not thinking about that. So that's called brief solution focused, brief therapy, which I just personally noticed when I contacted that kind of therapist one time. Their first thing was, well, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve out of this? And I was like, I thought I was going to lay on a couch and talk about my childhood, really deeply relaxed. You want me to do some work? And they do. They want you to do some work on those questions. And you have to think, So that's all kind of future. There's a big difference between focusing on the past and focusing on the future, and in a kind of short-term, concrete goals. It's really like, how are you going to know? How are you going to know it's happened? How you know? How you know that the problem's finished now? What are you going to see? What's the actual difference? And can you do it this week? It's kind of like, wow. It's a different thing. It's not allowing you to sort of wallow and get in your story and all about, and this, but that's not everyone wants that. Everyone, many people want to talk about their story, and they kind of expect.
That's more my kind of thing, actually. The solution based, that kind of.
It's very different. I mean, if you even hear about it, you're like, I get it. And if you're caught in a kind of lockdown, frozen up situation, that's very complicated, and it's in that kind of zone that I was talking about, his mother, my father, he's there when I was this, when I was a kid, my father, and and the personality, like that's a really jungle. And this stuff is brief and clean, and it's distinct. You're really working on very concrete things, and it's come out of DeShazer. Stephen DeShazer, one of those American guy, and his wife. They're in America, a family therapy center. They watch thousands and thousands of hours of family therapy, and they just looked at the sections of talking that seemed to have a positive effect, that people could go away and they came back and go, I really used that. We were talking about that. That really helped when I got home. I could do that. And much better afterwards. Much better than when we were going all of that other stuff. That didn't really help. That just put me in a depression, So they used that, and they did a lot of meta studies, and been verified a lot, this one. But as I say, sometimes they're expected to do it in 3 sessions. It's brief.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it's not like, if you've got a problem, tell me about your problem. It's no, if you've got a solution. And it's like, it's a very different, like psychotherapy is like, there's the expert, you lay down, they're gonna know you, but whereas solution focused differs in certain ways. One is that the person coming in is the expert. They've got all the resources already.
Right.
Not the person sitting there listening. It's not it. And the other thing is they don't have a theory of personality, whereas Freud built one, the iceberg and the id and the ego and the super ego and all the, and that's what they're always like looking to confirm and check out and get you to understand, and how does it work and all that sort of stuff. There's nothing of that. It's really like, what's the solution already? Tell me.
Within you,
what resources have you got? Well, that's good. So let's, they got things like the miracle question. It's like if you had a miracle overnight when you're asleep and you walked out in the place, what would be the first sign that the miracle had worked for what you want?
Right.
know, like, oh, me and my husband had a hug and the child came and she's really happy. Why? I think, okay, you know, so it's like not 100% on the negative problem. It's focusing on always on the exceptions to the problems. So everyone can remember that, you know, bad moments of behavior, but it's not always the case. You know, it's like, you know, everyone's seen, you know, Donald Trump's worst moments, but he wasn't always like that. You know, he said some good stuff. You know, or Adolf Hitler had his downsides. You know, he had his moments, but he had some good stuff. He's quite good in drawing, you know, or something. It's like doing a lot of that is like no one, you know, that no problem doesn't have solutions. And if you keep focusing on the solutions and what's working, it has a different effect than if you only keep going, oh, this house, it's so dark, it's so like wet, it's broken, it's like, oh. If you go on and on, you're not likely to keep the motivation that you need and the positivity. And that seemed to be the job of the brief, you know, the solution focused therapist is to get the person to stop mulling around the problem and regurgitating it and, you know, click back. So that's very different than eye movement or body based or mindfulness or psychodynamic. Very different, you know. So I think even getting aware that there are so many different ones, it's what we really need are these what they call choice agents or something. These new, what I notice of these big therapy chat groups, the online ones, not chat groups, the online counseling, is some of them have a kind of what they call a choice agent or something, or help agent, but they're the one who listen to what you're talking about and go, okay, I know the person for you, it'll be this one.
Right. Okay.
So I think it's a bit, one of the problems is it throws us to say, you know, what do you want, you know, in the world of therapy, right? I don't know. It's like working in the mall. And you're like, you know, it's like, you need the kind of shopping assistant, you know, it's like, you do need, in that kind of world. And many of them, because they're making their living at this, they don't really show you anything up ahead for free. So you don't even know what you're buying. And if it's very expensive, like, you know, many of them have gone in for this very expensive per hour thing to try to make a living. Then that can be very unfair, I think, on the you know, there shouldn't be any incentive for the therapist to keep someone going on and on and on and on. Yes, because it's to the advantage of the therapist and it's not to the advantage of the other one, you know, the person coming in. So I think, so getting the right, or mixture, you know, a mixture. And I don't know what the right mixture is. Maybe it's different for everyone. Is maybe you also need a combination of things. For example, you need some psychotherapy just to present. You say, no, when I was a child, no, my dad really came in my room and he just crippled me with what he said, you know, like, maybe you've never told anyone you know, about that sort of thing. So I think time to time, a bit of that's good. And then some of this solution stuff, or someone who knows how to shift it to there, and then, right, okay, let's not talk about the past. Let's focus on right now and da-da-da-da. And then also, you can get physical reactions that are happening during this stuff, is to do something maybe like go and get a Swedish massage or something, just to do with the nerves and the muscles and the systems, you know, the parasympathetic and everything.
Absolutely.
Systems, to sort of get them rebooted and not, you know, continuing to be, you know, uptight or re-triggering.
Like contracted muscles all the time, and then the breathing's affected, and then the way the thinking is affected. Absolutely.
And then in amongst that, mindfulness part of it. But like if someone's got full-on bipolar depression or you know, clinical depression, I don't think just going and meditating and having mindfulness is the answer. I really don't. And I don't think the Buddha or any really competent meditation teacher would say so. I think incompetent ones would. They would say, oh yeah, this will fix everything. I just don't believe the case. It is complementary and, you know, complementary therapies and prescribing them in the right kind of way. That's rare to find, very rare to find. But I think that's what we need is access to therapies, big range of them. We need guidance, people who can say, for what you're this trauma you're dealing with, that's the right one for
Yeah,
a short
start
while.
there and then you'll develop and kind of progress into needing
Yeah.
that afterwards. Absolutely. That is
But
so
affordable. That's what's happening, is emerging as affordable online therapy. And then I think also, get the price down to these things.
yeah.
Otherwise it just becomes a plaything for the rich. In the Philippines, a full body massage, and there's, within where I'm living, there's 10 of them. It's $10 for an hour or something.
Oh,
10 US dollars for an hour.
yes.
So everyone has them, one or two a week. But you contact someone from London or America, and you say, or Australia, so you should go for a massage. Say, oh no, that's like $100.
Yeah. It's like
or I spoke to someone who did the solution focus thing, and I said, so what's your rate? And it was like the equivalent of, it was 150 New Zealand dollars for an hour. And I was like, and I went and looked on the website that talked about the cost of living over there, and I was like, I just had a pressure washer. It lasted for 3 years, constant use. That cost that. What have you got that's worth that for one? I think something ought to change where they shouldn't need to charge that much to be able to live. And it should just be made more accessible. Somehow that shouldn't be happening. And I think this is a reflection of what's happened in the past. So I think this is the idea of temples. Temples are supposed to be these kind of things where you can go, you can rest, you can get good advice, and many of those places you can often get some kind of therapeutic massage. Nothing strange and safe, and you can also get the other things. But that's kind of what we need, are these sort of campus, easily accessible hostels where they're safe and well provided for, and then all this online stuff that always find someone to talk with an app that's really helpful. It's not just what your friends can say, it's something skilled and well trained.
Brilliant. Oh my God, that was that was a really wonderful, excellent call. Like I've got 10 questions, and I think we've covered like 2.5, almost. And already that it's like you've shared so much really helpful and very important knowledge that you've researched yourself, that you've learned.
Mostly, let me just, rather than going, yes, I'm really, yes, you're right. I don't want to take all the credit at all. Dr. Todd Grande, brilliant, the best as far as I'm concerned.
Dr.
Todd Grande, YouTube, all his YouTubes on narcissism. Dr. Sam Vaknin, he wrote a book called Malignant Narcissism Revisited. But anyway, his precision is very good. For more woolly stuff that's a bit more digestible, if you just want a radio chat that's on these topics, Dr. Judy Rosenberg, WTF, What the Freud. She's What the Freud. She's pretty good. Ross Rosenberg is another expert or specialist on this topic. He's got a book called The Human Magnet Syndrome, but mainly on narcissistic families and the effects on interrelations. Another one is a life coach who's a bit speedy, but talks on this topic a lot, which is Richie Grannon. Again, he can pull out some of these sort of 16 signs that you're dealing with type ones. But I think that those are some of the ones. Facebook chat group, support groups, like there's one called Spanily. Basically sort of stands for support group for children of adult children of narcissistic parents or something. But if you put in narcissistic in a search, you'll find that there's a lot of them, either for specialist therapists or for regular public who grew up dealing with it. And I found those are pretty helpful because they're also non-interested people. They don't have any vested interest in fishing you for a client or something. They're just regular people giving advice to each other and commenting on, you know, you can put a question if you get accepted into the group sort of thing. Put a question in, a basic one, you know, why do I happen? You know, this is happening at work. What do I do? And they'll put in their 2 cents worth down in the comments. And it's not, you know, just like if you do that on under a YouTube, no one will answer much, or it'll be a weirdo or a troll or something. These groups tend to be heavily filtered and observed and are specialists just on this sort of one topic. So, but those ones I said, I listed, I think that if I left anyone, I think those are the main ones that I tend to. Oh no, there's another one called Dr. Ramini as well. She's excellent. She's an American therapist who specializes 100% in narcissism. You know, if that's, like I said, there's a bit of a danger in only focusing on narcissism. You know, it's a bit of a rabbit hole in itself. It ought to be balanced against some of those other things. Ironically, I think it's mindfulness that lets you know that you don't obsess, you don't over focus on it. There are many good books, audio books that you can get on Amazon and Audible and things like that, and just listen to them, you know, and just run them around, you know, with some are better than others. But as I said, I think Dr. Todd Grande, because there's no filler in there, it's clinical, and he's got experience of thousands of clients, and there are role playing where he shows him, you know, interacting, discussing with someone. And if you want to learn about the other branches of therapies that he describes, you could just do that. He's not 100% focused on it, but there's many on vulnerable narcissism, by the way. I don't think I said that. But, you know, those kind of things. What's it about? What's it like? What's it like for the person inside of it? What's, you know, many things. Brilliant. So yeah, those are really go-to things. What I've said is from what I've gleaned, you know, over the years of watching their stuff and then seeing what's going on around me, and but it's, you know, there are many things in there. The dark triad, you know, narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. There are many things more. This is really sort of scratched the surface for an hour and a half chat. That there's much more, and I didn't also involve Buddhism. You know, there's a lot inside the old stories of the life of the Buddha, which were examples of it, but also many things. If you watch, you know, many Netflix like Mindhunter, you know, or those things about behavioral psychology or behavioral science departments, they kind of have to know this stuff with what they're dealing with.
That's fascinating. Yeah, because I think also information allows you to have awareness, doesn't it? You know, when you start to learn about stuff. I know I've certainly been in a relationship. Sorry, I'm just running out of juice, so I'm going to quickly plug in here. And for many years, like my family members and my friends, my close friends were like, you know, we read this article. They were trying to put articles in front of me, you know, to see. They didn't actually want to too much intervene or kind of post it, you know, you're in a relationship with a narcissist. And you know, I would read through it, it'd be like, oh yeah. And they'd be like, can you see, you know, do you relate to anything?
That's about maps. You know, once you can cognitively recognize, like with a map, once you can cognitively recognize, oh yeah, here's that street corner, there's that thing. Yeah. And once the map, your reality map, you know, matches, you start to be able to validate. Invalidation is something narcissists do anyway. You know, so once you're starting to get clear signs from the big world out there, that are showing you there's a relevant bit of mapping here that you didn't know about.
Yeah.
And you can start to see a light at the end of the tunnel, and you can start to see, here's somebody who gets me. Because until then, like I say, you know, the other 999 people, you know, don't. So that, and they don't think you've got a problem. They think people have got cancer, have got a problem. you know, I think people in the third world probably have got a problem, but you haven't got a problem because there's not really anything to see. So
Sure.
because it's emotional, it's on the social, interrelational, emotional that the damage gets done. So this kind of cognitive, actually learning information, being able to list it cognitively, intellectually, that's going to help a bit. It's not the only thing, but it will definitely help recognize and identify, because that can set off, you know, artificially set off your warning signs that haven't been correctly programmed, you know, in growing up.
Yeah.
You've sort of you've been misinformed about a lot of things. If you've been exposed to it, the narcissistic exposure.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's
So
so
then
helpful.
it's retraining, exactly what you're saying is right. And also for children, if any of us at any of the age can recognize those lists and remember them, you're just that much more likely to not misinterpret something, or to just be wary, more wary. Like with anything, fire hazards, or the ocean, or anything, it is, you know, once you can recognize the signs of danger, you can respond. But if you don't know them, or with food education, what's toxic and what's not, once you can recognize the dangers, you can be a more safe person for yourself and for others.
Absolutely. And then probably less likely to attract or be attracted to that person later in life as well, because that's you know, that's kind of that pattern. So break that pattern.
People cling to the familiar,
the
comfort zone, and for children of narcissistic parents, then they, you know, there's a certain familiarity of that's abusive and is comfortable, even if it means you are, you know, you'll tolerate much more for the wrong reasons. So getting out of that and learning to stay non-contact and learning to live independent rather than dependent on a narcissist, which is the familiar thing. So all of those take a bit of waking up, and there's a tendency for various forms of narcissists to put people who are waking up back to sleep. It's the kind of thing that Richie Grannans calls the zombie witch doctor effect. You know, witch doctor will put people under a spell. Sometimes actually under a spell. There's laws against it in Australia because they would do it quite effectively. Is they'll, you know, grind up some bones or something, or say some sort of spells and that, and people would go into a sort of trance of life and just go, yeah, I agree, and go along, you know, kind of like sleep. But once they start, go, hey, are we all sleepwalking? Or, you know, once they see that, they've got ways to sort of put them back.
Well, challenging narcissists. That's something in my relationship with this particular person, was that when I did start to wake up, and then I started to challenge them, not purposefully, but it would just be automatically, because I would be thinking differently. I would be thinking independently. I would be feeling more empowered in myself to put my perspective across without walking on eggshells or worrying about whether it's in compliancy with what he was thinking or how I should be. And just seeing like the malfunction of acceptance of that person, to me, challenging what they had enforced upon me before, you know, and instantly it was just like not a magnet. It was like, you know, we couldn't be in the same space together because they couldn't support being challenged constantly, because I became this horrid person that was evil and mean and completely, I was the one that was like really off cut and had problems. It was really like, looking back in hindsight now.
That's what we're talking about. And that thing, that's called narcissistic rage. So it's, you know, when a child, the toys go out the pram, you know, and the whole explosive, you know, mess of an infantile rage. So that's what it is. You know,
Yeah.
once they see that it's somebody's threatening the supply, they explode and with rage, and they get extremely angry, which they do anyway. You know, they tend to have get very bored easy. They're very impatient, and they get the way that, and the reason that they're getting angry is to send out the message to also others, you know, about what happens when people challenge the narcissist's reality. Because for them, there's only one reality, and it's the one that where they're in control. So once they start hearing questioning, you know, they will flare up in a very bad temper. But yeah, and then what you're saying, that they will gaslight, well, they will portray that person doing that as defective and unhealthy. That's all very typical. That's why, you know, there's an art to getting out of it, you know, and when you start, because if you're just going to stay there and call them out, that's not going to work out well for you. So there is this thing of getting your escape route, and then, you know, because there's also no point in calling them out. They're not going to change. I think this is one of the self-delusions of the dependent people, or people basically wrapped up with them, is that they will believe in fixing them, changing them, healing them. And it's, you know, that only is going to come from within, and it's just not very likely. It's not very likely that Donald Trump's going to change that much, really, you know. But it's not up to us to lose sleep and do it for him. But no, with any, I suppose, you know, you can safeguard yourself against them. You can even live relatively near them, but you mustn't be in the orbit, or agree to be in their orbit of control.
Yes.
You know, this is one thing they want to get you to agree to things where everything that's yours is theirs. That's something that they want to do. I've noticed it with a narcissistic person I know. As I was bringing some foods in to a place, and they were kind of like, you know, should we share those other people? And I was like, oh no, what's mine is yours. And he was like, ah. They were kind of like, you saw this principle grab, you know, because you could in your mind there's thinking, I'll do that with everything you've got. And it's not that. It's like, if they'll ask you to do something, you know, can you just do this thing for kind of 15 minutes, 20 minutes? And then before you know it, somehow, you know, 2 weeks later, it's 3 hours, and it's tons of stuff. Because they're just never-ending amount of affirmation, this confirmation that they are in control of you. There's a never-ending amount that they want to control you, and just be able to do that. So the way that, you know, that Dr. Ramani is very good at doing this kind of thing about preventing enabling. Okay, I'll go on then, because it will just never end until you're destroyed.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, thank you so
much. One of my favorite. It's not my favorite subject. It's sad.
No, I'm sure, but I understand. Yes,
I'm glad that I believe very much. I'm passionate about the need for the awareness raising of narcissism and what it's about, and more like constructive, you know, not just what it's about, as I say, because it can lead to this, you know, this demonizing. So that's not going to help. It's really is, we need constructive protection for people involved, and we need, you know, more awareness in general, what it is, how to deal with it.
How to deal with it, how to cope, how to deal with it. Absolutely. Well, really, I'm sure that this will help a lot of people. And that's the whole point, you know, to get this out for others to listen to, and for others to help others, and to those people to help other people. So that's wonderful. I really thank you so much for your time and all of your great knowledge that you share, because it's so well put together as well. It's the way, in fact, one of the many things I love is the way you're able to communicate some very difficult and complex situations and create them to be communicated in a way that everybody can understand. And I really appreciate that, because sometimes we get these blockers. It's like, oh God, what does that mean? That sounds kind of what I'm relating to, or that resonates with me, but I don't understand it. But you have this amazing way to communicate in a way that everybody can understand, and it breaks it down into more bite sizes, more kind of creative ways of understanding, and that's really helpful. So that's great, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday. If Sunday,
great.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can exceed. I think we got 7 views of our last one. I think 6 of them were me.
And the 7th will be me then.
Yeah, it's very depressing. You go and look at someone else's YouTube and they got like, 1.5 million views. I go, how many did we get? 6. I'll watch it once more. I'll just try and bump the figures up.
That's it, absolutely. But in fact,
you're watching me.
Yeah.
How narcissistic is that? I must look in the mirror for an hour and a half.
And write lots of comments about yourself on the
that's right.
box.
Yeah, under aliases. Yeah.
Excellent. Very good to see you. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much again.